Fatima. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Welcome to the Great Big Book Club. And I have a few questions for you about this particular moment we are living all together. And then we will talk about The Runaways, your new beautiful novel. And we will end with a few questions arrived to the Great Big Book Club.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
once you said that the work of a writer, apart from writing, includes watching movies and reading, things that
Yeah.
make me feel incredibly well, especially with my conscience. You also said that time is a necessity for good writing. What kind of writer work are you doing at the moment during this lockdown? And has your writing routine changed?
Hmm. Well, thank you to the Great Big Book Club and to you, Ortensia, for doing this chat. I think that the work of writing is always done best in solitude. And that work doesn't necessarily have to be you sitting down to actually write. It's thinking about things, it's marinating, it's that inner dialogue you have when you're thinking of characters or of stories or of an incident. And I think in a sense lockdown is very good for that in a way, because if you're lucky like we are, and we're certainly very lucky to be able to be at home, to have homes, to have the luxury of staying at home, um, then you've got that time to imagine, to think, and definitely to watch and to read and to listen. I do think that writing isn't done just between the writer and the page. You're inspired by things you hear, things you see, feelings that anything a piece of music might evoke. And so I guess what I'm doing in lockdown is a bit of all of that. I'm watching TV, and you know that I'm a big fan of TV. I think some of the stuff on television is really novelesque. I mean, some of it's better than what's in a lot of novels. Um, I'm listening to podcasts. I'm reading a lot of books. And I'm just thinking. I just read an amazing book called Minor Detail, which is by a Palestinian writer called Adania Shibli. And it's being transported, the act of reading. And so I'm enjoying all that.
That you normally are really always around the world. So, and what I notice is also that people which are really stressing life and really moving life are feel relieved in this lockdown. Actually, they're forced to slow down. You think, I mean, something has changed for you?
I have to say, I don't like being forced to slow down. I do move around a lot. I do travel a lot. And I do miss that, I have to say, because I think there's something, for me, very nourishing that comes from seeing new things, from seeing new people, from being confused, from being lost, from discovery. And I do really miss that. I really miss people, I have to
Yeah, me
say.
too.
Yeah, it's not the same. I mean, Zoom is not the same. You know, you can't people watch on Zoom. You can't eavesdrop on Zoom. You're just stuck.
Well, people, that is not the same.
Well, I mean, I think slowing down is good, but I think technology also means that we're not really slowing down. You know, we're connected, and we're able to plug ourselves into things.
Yes,
So
I
I
remember
don't.
that you sometimes go offline. In some chosen periods, you just close everything. Now,
Yeah,
what are you doing at the moment? Are you, I mean, really
yeah.
connected or the opposite?
Yeah, well, I do like to have like fasts where I just go off technology and I won't look at anything that needs to be plugged in, and I won't use anything that needs to be plugged in. But I have to say, this is not one of those times, because lockdown is a kind of lonely time. So we're
It's
plugged
everything
in
we
one.
have. It's
Huh?
everything we have left.
Yeah, it's true. So that's our only connection left, you know. So I think at the moment, I, like many other people, am probably hyper plugged in, and it is making me a little restless, I have to say. I don't like to be this plugged in normally.
So let's talk about The Runaways,
Mm.
your latest novel. I read it again 1 year later and I loved it even more.
Oh,
I mean, it is passionating, it is compassionate, it is brave, it is moving, and it is incredibly fun.
oh,
And
thank you.
the writing is it's sophisticated, there is a rhythm, but it seems really spontaneous. Even though I know how much you love to rewrite.
Yeah.
How long did it take to write this book?
Um, I am a big fan of rewriting. I think all the good stuff happens in rewriting. It it took a long time. I mean, Runaways is out now in England in paperback, and it comes out in America in August. So it has this funny life of a book, which means that it's still traveling and moving. But I finished writing it. Wow, I finished writing it probably 2 years ago, and I started writing it in 2014. So it was about 4.5 years, 4 years, something like that, from beginning till end. Um, and it changed very much. I mean, when I first wrote the first draft of The Runaways, it was a 30,000 page novella almost. 30,000 page, sorry, 30,000 word. That would be crazy if it was a 30,000 page
30,000 pages.
novella. Yeah, no, it was 30,000 words, which for people who don't think in words is not very much. I mean, it's like 100 something pages maybe. And the final book ended up being, 100,000 words, 400 pages. So it changed dramatically over the course of writing.
It's the story of three millennials running away from their lives to join an Islamic training camp in Iraq. Why did you choose that topic? And what is the original image you have in your mind, the seed of the book, if you have one?
Mm. Um, well, I I was wounded. I felt wounded. I felt hurt. And that's really the seed of the book, I suppose, is that 20 years of occupations and war and invasions had created a really ugly atmosphere in a lot of the world, and certainly in a lot of the parts of the world that I'm from. Um, I was born in Afghanistan and I grew up in Syria, and I'm from Pakistan. And over the course of my being 18 years old till now, pretty much all those countries were invaded, bombed, destroyed. And I started to feel wounded by always being imagined in a certain way, by being reduced to a certain thing. And the experience of being at airports, and the hostile treatment you get at airports if you're from certain countries or if your passports are certain colors, it started to scratch at me. And that's really where I guess The Runaways was born. But it's also a novel, I think, about not just radicalism and young people who are running away um, to join radical groups. It's also, I think, a novel about um, alienation and isolation, a kind of loneliness that can easily be weaponized by the internet.
Yes, I noticed that none of the three main characters of the book radicalized because of religion. I mean, actually, they do it because of the lack of recognition, as you said, humiliation, loneliness, and social injustice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you're from a lot of the parts of the world that has been in the storm of radicalism, you know that religion is not the spark that drives people to do terrible things. It's a feeling of isolation. It's a feeling of not being included, of having no vision, of having no possibility of a dignified future, that I think corrodes people, and it corrodes a special kind of anger that can then be unleashed to do terrible things. And religion just isn't really one of them. They discovered, as I'm sure you know, all these documents from ISIS camps. I mean, much after I was writing the book, but they discovered all these documents, and of course they loved keeping records. And one of the things that they found in all these records was that a lot of the new recruits into some of these groups, like ISIS, were given a kind of, religion 101 test to see what they knew. And most of them failed it. I mean, they didn't even get average scores. They got below average scores. So these are not religious scholars. These are not people who are driven to violence because they've got some superior understanding of, you know, verses and things.
Even though the theme is pretty serious and intense, it's the book. It's really fun. I mean, there is a really fun moment during the march of Sunny and Monty. The march on the desert they do together, when Sunny makes a selfie with Rita, his Kalashnikov, and trying to convince Monty that he's doing propaganda. The entire march is hilarious.
Thank you.
And it wasn't an easy subject to make us laugh.
No, I mean, you know, I actually, one of the edits I had was to take out a lot of jokes. I was told at some point it's a bit too funny and you can't really do that. But you know, there are moments in humor, I think, in humorous things. For example, you know, Monty and Sunny, who are marching through a desert, I stop every once in a while and Sunny takes selfies. I mean, I think selfies are hilarious. I think anyone who can put down, you know, a kind of self-consciousness that most people have long enough to take a selfie, there's something funny in that. And if you make them do it in a sort of odd background, then it's even.
The relation between Monty and Sunny during the march is the heart of the book, and actually of the story. And they are so different. I mean, they're like this. They are forced together in this binary narration, but both of their minds are somewhere else. It also looked like a parody of their original countries, India and Pakistan, not too fond of each other, but forced to be next to each other.
Do you know, that's really interesting, Ortensia. I never actually thought of it as an Indian and a Pakistani walking, because Sunny is so English that he kind of is English first. But that's actually a good point. I didn't intend that. But that's the wonderful thing actually about talking about books, because things come up that things come up. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I was thinking of it more in terms of class, because Sunny and Monty come from such obviously different backgrounds. I mean, these are two young men thrown together in the middle of a desert. And Monty, who's essentially a rich boy from Karachi, you know, he goes to a posh school, he lives in a posh neighborhood. His only travel experience really is to European capitals with his parents. Monty, you know, Monty comes out with a whole kit, like he's got gear with him, you know, he's almost has sunblock. I mean, let's put it that way. And Sunny, of course, is
Even
from a
Raya.
Huh?
Even at Raya.
Oh yes, that's right. He even has a satellite phone. That's right. And Sunny, of course, doesn't come from that world. You know, he doesn't have any travel experience. His travel experience is limited to a trip he takes to London from Portsmouth with his cousin. You know, a trip that he dresses up for, that he irons his sweatshirt for because he's so excited. And so for me, the real tension between the boys is one of background, of class, of inequality, of having and not having.
It's clearly like that. That was just a symbol that came to my mind.
No, I like it. I wish I had intended it. I could have taken credit there.
Talk about the stronger character of this book of characters, the lion is Anita Rose. I mean, she is really a charming character. I mean, actually my favorite. Tell us about her, please.
Well, Anita Rose is also from Karachi, but unlike Monty, she doesn't grow up in a posh neighborhood and she doesn't go to an international school. She lives in Machar Colony, which is one of the largest slum settlements in the city. And Anita Rose's story is one of a raging inequality. And it's a story of a girl on the periphery, and one of poverty and the anger of poverty and of dispossession. And it's interesting you say she's your favorite. I mean, I have to confess, Sunny is my favorite character.
I know, I mean, it's the one I like the less.
Oh, he's my favorite. I love him
all the time.
No, I love him. But
I'm nice with poor Monty.
but Anita Rose is like my second favorite.
No, I like Monty because he's good. He's a good, and the other one is so sometimes so tricky with Monty.
Monty is my least favorite, I have to say. But Anita's story was actually one of the last stories I wrote for the book. So the book, when I immediately thought about it, always had Monty and Sunny, but it was years later that it had Anita. I mean, she came to me quite close to the end, but almost fully formed, and I enjoyed writing her parts almost the most, I would say.
See, Osama, which is Anita Rose's old Marxist mentor, says to her, the only way to look at a powerful society was through the people they excluded. And then he says, the only way to survive is to fight. What is the fight in social and racial activism today for you?
Well, I think almost all facets of our life require some aspect of a fight. You know, every choice we make, I think, requires us to struggle against something as well as for something. I mean, it feels more and more like that today. You know, the people that we have elected to run our countries now determine whether we live or die, whether we get tested or not tested, whether we have vaccines or don't have vaccines, you know, whether some people are able to stay home and others starve because they're forced to stay home. So in that sense, I think that all action is essentially political, whether it's remembering something that you are required to forget, whether it's bearing witness, whether it's telling stories, whether it's believing something and acting upon it, or whether it's physically being out in a field and defending a cause.
So you think that writing a book is a fight?
Well, you know, I think it should be. You know, I think it should be. I do think all novels are political, and I think the best ones are the ones that force you to confront the way in which you live, the way in which you might survive while someone else doesn't. The book I mentioned just at the top, Minor Detail, is a really stunning political novel, actually, because even when it's telling the story of a woman in a car following an obsession, it's also the story of who is allowed to follow their obsessions, you know, who is allowed to stop you, you know, who has the power to open a door or close it. And I do think that books are an important part of that. I mean, I don't want to sound worthy and say they're the best part of it or they're the only part of it, but I certainly think you need them. You need them as part of any fight. Yeah.
Let's go back to the present situation, because I noticed that today the fears of the others are getting so evident, even if you go out and to buy food. What kind of changes do you think that social distancing will bring to our societies? And I mean, as a novelist, how do you imagine it, even in a fantasy way? Our future?
It's strange, you know, I mean, I notice now that, you know, when you see other people, like if you go outside for exercise or, you know, you go to get food or things like that, and you come across another person, they almost jump a distance to be away from you. And there's something horrifying about that. There's something so sad about that.
Yes.
But at the same time, you also notice that people are kind of excited to see another person. So even as they're jumping back, they're kind of, you know, watching you and interested. And I really hope that we're able to overcome this without turning against each other. Because, I mean, as far as I can tell, the whole point of this thing is that a separation between people, you know, there's not possible actually to enforce, because for us to be able to return to normal life, all of us have to be healthy and all of us have to be safe. And that means not just
and the fear stay. I mean, fear is something which is not so subjective, and sometimes it can stay for years, even if there is no reason for it.
It can, and I think, you know, we before the pandemic, we were perfectly afraid of a lot of things.
Exactly.
You know, all that fear of foreigners, of outsiders, of, you know, migrants, of it looks so small now. I mean, I always thought it was small, but it looks even stupider and smaller now, because you can't be safe in your silo. Someone in Italy isn't going to be safe unless someone in, China is safe, unless someone in Thailand is safe. And so I really hope social distancing is a word that we forget soon and that
Hopefully.
leaves our vocabulary. Yeah.
You think that coronavirus killed the war on terror? I mean, drones are flying.
I mean, one of the early absurd things was, ISIS did put out a kind of press release to its fighters saying, please don't travel to Europe. It's very dangerous because it's filled with corona. So I do think that we now understand, as we should have always been thinking, that terror is not the only danger we face. There is the danger of poverty, there is the danger of inequality, there is the danger of pandemics, of health, of how we're going to grow as a planet without setting fire to everything and ending up dead ourselves. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely the new terror. You're right. You're very right. I mean, and it's,
Yeah, the global pandemic show different approach of. Please go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying that it shows different approach of countries and how to face it. Often Asian countries doing much better than the Westerners.
Mm.
And what about Pakistan, India? I mean, I guess it's less of a problem of coronavirus if you are starving. I mean, the problem are others, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we saw very early from South Asia, is that the immediate tragedy wasn't coming from the virus. The immediate tragedy is, how do you do stay at home lockdowns when hundreds of millions of people are daily wage workers, which means they have to work for something as low as £10, €10 a day. If they don't go to work, their family starves. There were terrible, terrible images and videos coming from India, of tens of millions of migrant workers who had to walk 200 kilometers to get back to their villages. And I think we see something really telling about urbanization, about migration, about capitalism through the lens of this virus. At the same time, what you said is also true, is that these are countries where people cannot live in silos. You can't live in a sort of gated community and then just be safe. You're confronted every day with people who don't live like you, who don't have your privileges and your luxuries. And you are required not just to live together, but you are required, I think, to help each other along. And so it has been interesting to see, in the case of Pakistan at least, of people doing that, of people using this time, and it's Ramadan now, to make sure that they're giving food that they have that others might not, that they're taking in animals who are abandoned. And that's been interesting to see, and I think it's important also that there isn't such a big fear of other people in the same way that maybe one sees.
Yeah, here you're more isolated. Even before it was this case.
Yeah, you're never isolated there. There's always contact with people, whether they're suffering or their joy. But yeah, it's one of those things that every day something new happens. I read somewhere that essentially they said a lot of these Asian countries, I think it was the New York Times, that said are young countries, and that our populations are largely under the age of 30, 35, and that's partially why they've had less trouble with the virus.
Could be. I have a few questions arrived to the Great Big Book Club, and I ask you.
I want to ask you before we do the questions, if we can. I know because your book Malai came out in Italy.
It came out in Italy, Malai, published by Rizzoli in this beautiful moment.
Just before Italy's lockdown, right?
Yeah, yes, just the 25th of February. But I mean, a book is a fight, as you said, and we're fighting. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We were lucky that it came out because there's a lot of authors who had their publication blocked. And, so it's Malala is alive.
And giving people comfort in
exactly.
these weeks
I mean, at the beginning, people weren't reading so much, but they were in shock in Italy, especially in Italy when there was all this like really dramatic lockdown since the
Yeah.
beginning. And then lately in the last months, I start to receive a lot of people who loved it too.
And just for people who don't know in the big book club, will you just tell us what Malala is about and if it has any, if it's going to come out in English? Do you have plans to
Hopefully,
translate it?
yes. Hopefully, yes. I mean, we were working on that just before the lockdown, and we are starting now again. And
Okay.
actually, it's a story of an Afghan girl which migrates to Italy, and it's a story of mutation of identity. It's a story, an adventurous story at the same time, and it's
Yeah.
actually it's the meeting of two cultures. I mean, I try to explain or tell in the story what happened when two cultures get together,
Hmm.
and that is mainly them.
So
But
my guys are going to Iraq and yours are coming to Italy. It's a story of
yes, yes,
two
but I
different
mean,
journeys.
she has something in common with Anita Rose, Malalai. She's
Yeah.
kind of brave.
Oh. Oh yeah, that's interesting. That is
So yeah,
interesting. Okay.
she's another special girl.
Another big female character.
Exactly. So I have the question for
Tell
you.
me. Yeah.
So we have a Fai who asks you,
Hmm.
you consider some tangible inspiration for your work on a more personal level. What drives you daily?
What drives me daily? Well, you know, when you're working on a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, there's some part of it that lodges itself somewhere in your mind. And every day brings with it a new detail um, that you don't understand or that you haven't thought through, and then that drives you. You know, sometimes it's a question about a character. Sometimes it's an exciting moment you've had the day before that you want to continue. And so writing is really, I guess, that's a very good question, because writing is not about one big thing that drives you. It's about millions of little things that get caught under your skin,
Yes.
and that only writing allows you to get out.
That's why rewriting is the best thing, because
Yeah,
the book gets richer and richer every time you pass through it.
exactly. It's like a second coding, or it's it's you know, it's that feeling of, I mean, this is a bad analogy, but you know, when you go, if you go running the first time, and you and I both like running, you go running the first time, you can barely do it. You know, you're out of breath, you're tired, you want to stop all the time. But the 50th time you go running, you know, you can run for miles. And I think that's true with everything in life, and certainly with writing. The more you polish it, um, the richer it shines.
We have a question from LV5 school group.
Mhm.
What influence do you think the Western world is having on the other cultures globally?
Yeah, that's another good question. The book that I wrote after the Runaways, which, because books come out at different points, is out now as well, is called New Kings of the World, and it's about global popular culture, and it
Exactly.
basically,
Beautiful that book.
thank you, and it makes the argument that while the West influenced global culture really over the last century, the 21st century is not a century that looks to the West for influence. That the century we live in today is one that is looking globally. You know, if you were watching a film, let's say 30 years ago, it was likely that whatever country you were in, if you weren't watching your own cinema, you were watching American cinema or maybe English cinema. But that was pretty much it, except for a couple of independent releases. And today that's not true. You know, you have people in Peru who are watching Turkish television shows, they're watching Japanese films, anime. You know, Bollywood films are another thing that have gone far and wide all over the world. And I think that global popular culture is far richer today because it's opened up, because it's about, I suppose it's about a blowback that we're facing now. You know, Hollywood used to have a certain glamour and excitement to it, and it doesn't particularly have that anymore. It's just kind of about guns and shooting and cars, and that gets boring after a while. So now people want stories of history, of tradition.
But then beautiful stories all often come out of situations which are a bit tough. I mean, after a while, otherwise they repeat each other
Yeah.
in the total happiness of and fulfillment of all the.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I always say, look at Fast and the Furious. Like, what number are they on? 15? You know, how many stories can you tell about a bunch of people who drive fast cars? There've got to
Yeah.
be other stories. And I think we do see that changing. You know, I think Parasite's success and recognition is a sign that we're looking at new places for culture. And I think that's
Yes, but actually they were a kind of using a model was American, like for Parasite.
a model. You mean using film or?
The way they made it.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think I didn't feel when I watched it that it was an American film. I see what you mean in some
An
respects.
American film, but I mean that could go to Oscars.
Oh, yeah, sure. Certain there's a certain modernity and a slickness.
Yeah.
But I also think it was a really kind of biting commentary on capitalism and inequality and
Yeah, I loved it for that.
yeah. And I'm struggling to think of um a Hollywood film that had that.
No, not many lately.
No, I can't
Not
think of.
that, not that I saw them. Maybe they are independent. And
Yeah.
there are many other questions for you. I mean, there is Katia from New York. There is Karen from Perth, Australia. Unfortunately, I think we finished the time.
We have finished the
We're
time.
like going, yes.
Or should I try and answer them in one word or no? We don't
Oh,
have.
if you want. That's so. Karen, Perth, Australia. When did you write your first book?
Uh, I oh, see, I talk so much I can't do it in one sentence. I first published when I was 15 years old, but I wrote my first book I think when I was 7 or 8.
Yeah. I was 10, so I can ask you. What is your schedule like when you're writing?
Oh, I'm very strict with myself when I'm writing. I will write in the mornings. I'll wake up and get right to work. And I'm not allowed to meet friends for lunch. I'm not allowed to go out or do anything non-work like till about 3, 4. And then after that, I'm a sort of free agent. I can move around. But I think you have to be strict because writing is work like anything else.
Where do you get your book ideas from?
They come from strange places and they come from unexpected places. For me, a lot of it will come from something someone says that doesn't get lost in conversation, that sticks with me and that I start to feel haunted by. And that's when I know I have an idea. So Shadow of the Crescent Moon, which was the first novel I wrote, came to me because I asked a family friend about someone, and the answer they gave me,
Yeah, they came random.
yeah, it shocked me so much. I just thought about it for months and then eventually wrote a book about it.
Then you focus on a little detail that it seems nothing, and then it gets enormous.
Exactly. It becomes a universe.
Fatima, it was a big pleasure to see you, even
You
if
too. You too, from very far.
hopefully we'll see each other soon again.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.